And we're live once again. Welcome to Bearded Philosophy, the show with the biggest identity crisis on the planet. We're back live again. I think we found a way to make this work go live, and we've got our different setup in order. But we've got an interesting show ahead this week. We are going to be discussing a few points. With me, as always, is Hugh. How are we doing this week, Hugh?
Hey, Shauno. I'm doing very well, thank you, mate. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Excited for the show today. So today we are going to be talking, should you change your behavior to make people feel less threatened? And we're going to be talking pub vaccines. And let's get this show started.
Slick.
Yes. Actually, we need to do that one more time. I fucked up for the re-record anyway. I had that banner there. So let's get this show started. And we're in. So Hugh, this week you raised, actually, when we were going into last week, you raised something that you thought was an interesting topic. And you saw, it was a post on Facebook, I believe, that made you, that gave you the idea of something you wanted to bring to the table to discuss. Can you give me a bit more info on that?
Yeah, of course, mate. It was something, when I came across it on my Facebook feed, could see it kind of bouncing around. I was like, oh, this would make a really great talking point. I won't mention the guy's name because I haven't asked his permission. But what I'm going to do is just read directly from his message. And this will kind of set up the interchange that happened with, by the looks of it, this guy's wife and one of his friends. So he's put here, and I know that he's a rugby player as well. I'm 6'1", 17 stone, and off the pitch, you'd probably be, you would probably describe me as gentle. But that doesn't stop a stranger thinking I'm imposing or threatening, especially with recent tragic events. Backing off crossing the road or taking disarming actions is the least I could do when out and about. I think it starts with self-awareness. And then Q, loads of messages coming in. One of his friends kind of supported that. Agree, mate. Some people are talking about snowflake behavior, but if it was my wife, my girls, or my mum, I would want someone to do that for them. There was a few of those type of comments. And then where the debate comes in, and I wanted just to get your take on it, was one chap that said, look, I 100% disagree with you. Why should you or I have to do that? The issue is not with us. It's with absolute wankers in society, which in the grand scheme of things is a very small number. Pretty soon you'll have to walk past a woman and look at the floor. So this then instigated a conversation from the original postie's wife. Do you want me to go into that, Sean, or do you want to chip in at this stage?
Well, my first thought when I hear this is, what is this guy doing when he's walking by women that he is so imposing? Not your friend, but the guy who's commenting sort of contrary to this. I'm not putting this into the context of women. I'm just saying, for either man or woman, if he's walking, what are his behaviors that he's not willing to change, I guess, is my question. What is it that he thinks he should be allowed to do? Should he be allowed to stare and scowl at somebody when he walks by them? Is that something that should be acceptable behavior, whether it's a man or a woman? I'm just trying. I think with this, there's some level of nuance that's not being necessarily addressed by this gentleman. That's where I sort of see the initial thought process.
Yeah, I think from, so I've read the comments a couple of times and gone through. I think it's a case of what he doesn't want to do more than what he's doing. I think he's kind of doesn't feel that as a person on the innocent side of things shouldn't have to be changing what he does because he doesn't have any intention to do any harm or doesn't want to. So therefore, why should the rules come in for someone that has that type of intention? If I follow this on, I think we'll get a nice little discussion off the back of it, because the original postie's wife comes in and calls this guy's name out just to say, so you're okay with making a woman feel threatened and intimidated because of your why should I logic in speech marks, when a very simple, and I'm really talking simple here, changing your behavior when coming across a lone woman in the dark could alleviate the feeling of threat for her. Why wouldn't you, in caps, why wouldn't you, is more the question. The issue isn't with us women either, but we still have to change our behavior. We walk with keys between our fingers, no music on, no podcast on, talking on the phone to anyone who will answer, going the longer way so we can stay in lit areas, rape alarms at the ready. But you won't slow down or cross the road to make a woman feel more comfortable. That kind of attitude is part of the problem.
Yeah, I think she's raised a good, not as such a point, but she's really highlighting her perspective, and she's trying to give this gentleman maybe a different look at it from somebody who feels vulnerable. And I think from the gentleman's point of view, it's like, would you not be happy to not scowl at somebody and make them think you want to rape them? I don't know why this is such a hard ask. I mean, is the idea that I don't think we're looking at it in isolation, that she's saying you only have to cross the road. You know, there's a lot of context here that's being left out. I think she just doesn't want to feel threatened. And she wants, you know, people who are walking around in public at night to make it a point to not look threatening or to not act strange, or, you know, and I think that's fair for anybody, not just women. You don't want people to think you're a threat.
Yeah, and I think the original postie's comment, his last sentence was spot on. It's just about self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
And it seems that in this exchange, which I love kind of going through this type of stuff, the person's friend is coming at it from just his, you know, blinkered view set, which is that, look, I'm not doing anything wrong. There's nothing, you know, I have no ill will. So why shouldn't I just keep doing what I'm doing? And the postie's wife is saying, well, hang on a minute. You can do everything that you're saying. That doesn't change. I've still got to do X, Y, and Z and all these things. And this is how I still feel as a result. So if you don't want to try and make life a little bit easier and less intimidating for some women, then go ahead. I just don't quite understand. We're not, you know, I don't think this is a big ask. I think, so I'm going to follow up with this guy's, his guy's response to this guy's wife, because this kind of sets up where he's coming from. So he's called her name out and just said, look, of course I'm not okay with a woman feel threatened, but I'm not part of the problem though, am I? I've never done anything to make a woman feel threatened, which I think there's the assumption. Once you adopt these ideas that Once you adopt these ideas that men should do this or men should do that, etc., it doesn't stop. Slippery slope, you could say, Sean.
Need a slippery slope alert. We really need one.
We do definitely.
Yeah.
Should just like this Green Party woman earlier saying men should have a 6 p.m. curfew with a laughing emoji. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but it just seems strange to me that I have to cross the road to walk past you because you're feeling threatened. She just then quickly replies with, look, but that's your perception, that you haven't done anything to make a woman feel threatened. But you don't actually know that for a fact, do you? How could you possibly know? That's the whole point. Nobody's saying you're going out of your way to intimidate, but you're also not going out of your way to not, in caps, intimidate. There's a huge difference. You knowing you're not a threat isn't enough. So saying once you adopt these ideas, it never stops is so ridiculous. I think they said that about women voting too. There's always someone that takes things to the extreme, and that woman for the Green Party is one of them. But what I'm suggesting isn't anywhere close to that. But hey, what do I know? I'm only a woman who experiences it countless times. Let's agree to disagree. So another new friend then jumps in just to kind of like, you know, try and reiterate her points. But that's largely the kind of topic that brought to the table. And I thought, what is all this about? And I kind of read on the news that this lady had gone missing. I think she was in London. I can't remember the borough.
This was a news story last week. Yeah.
Yeah. Shall I hand this over to you now, Sean? Because I think you've done a bit more digging on this. But I kind of looked into that story a little bit. And then I thought this might be a good topic to talk about.
Well, I think this links in, and I don't know the story particularly well. I know sort of the links to this story, where there was a woman who was murdered, and it's not as if she was walking down the road, you know, wearing a revealing dress, and not that that's anything. So let me clarify here. I'm talking about sort of the stereotype, which is wrong anyway. You know, a woman wearing a revealing dress doesn't have necessarily any bearing on this. Nobody's at fault when they're assaulted or murdered. That's ridiculous to assume so. But it's I think it's more to the point that people have perceptions that there's certain behaviors that you do, and in some avenues of life, it's correct, where there's some things you can do that are maybe less advisable in certain areas. So I wouldn't walk around with a Rolex on and, flashing money in let's say a really poor neighborhood that's got a high, instance
Good
of crime.
example. Yeah, good example.
But there's a different conversation to be had here with this, and like you said, it's about fear, and this person, this is going to be sort of magnified now, because if you're doing what, let's say, some people would say is correct, you're talking on the phone, you're doing, you're walking quickly, you're not making eye contact, and yet you still don't feel safe. I think from her perspective, the link here is, we're just asking you to make some effort to let us know that we don't have to be worried about you, because you can have all the right intentions in the world. And the best analogy I could think of for this is, for this gentleman who's not willing to change his behavior. Let's say he was in America, where there's open carry laws, and you can walk around with an AR-15 on your waist. Now, I know as a big guy, I'm 6'3", and I'm right around 290 pounds or 21 stone, somewhere in there, depending on what country you're from. I would feel highly nervous and intimidated by somebody with an AR-15. And let's say that's the law of the land. I would feel better if they would say to me, "Hi, not to worry. I'm a responsible gun owner. I have no threat." Like, I actually would want them to say that to me walking by, because I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know if they're just walking with it on their hip, or I don't know if they're on their way to a mass shooting. I have no idea, because I don't know, what's the application of that pistol on your side. And I think it's that's the only way, I think, for somebody in that position to equate what it's like for, let's say, somebody who feels threatened or vulnerable. What if you felt threatened or vulnerable walking around on the street? Would you not want somebody to make some concession or make some effort to, so that you let them know that you're not a threat? I think that's fair. And I think that there's some nuance here where he's just solely thinking on, oh, I have to cross the road and walk a block out of my way to make you feel good. And that's not at all what she's saying, I don't think.
No, so my penny's worth on it, having not spoke to anyone in this, was that this guy was thinking on the slippery slope. His argument that there's a rule, you're trying to get me to change behavior, and I'm not doing anything wrong, so I don't need to change anything. Because next, if I have to change that, I'm going to have to change this. Then I'm going to have to change this. Then I'm going to have to change this. So I think that was where his argument was coming from. And in his own head, he's never done anything to intimidate. He's not been meaning to, just going about his business. So why should he change is kind of his perception as I'm reading it. And what she rightly was calling out is, that's your perception. This is mine. Like, you can do all of that, but that doesn't mean that if you're 6'3" and you're 21 stone, you're not going to scare the shit out of women walking down the street at night. And actually what she's suggesting is just a couple of things, such as the slowing down, crossing the road, which I think has come out from the press. I think that's where my friend kind of put this out there. I think there were a couple of suggestions on things you can do, like slowing down, crossing the road, that type of thing, to come across as that, like, look, hey, I'm not a threat. It's like, non-verbally, don't worry about me. I'm, you've got no reason to be alarmed. I don't want you to feel threatened. So here's an action to try and minimize that. But the point that you made, which I thought was great, is that where I think this extends to, it isn't vulnerable women. I think it's making people feel vulnerable in general. And I think that if I were in a group, I'm 6 foot, so I'm not small either. I'm, barely above average, but I'm, I'd be classed as bigger than average. And
yeah, I'd say so.
Walking with you, Rob and Stefan, who we used to work with, like Stefan's 6'4", Rob 6'3", you 6'3", I'm the short one and I'm 6 foot. So if us were walking down the road, four, affable, nice guys, I think that's correct in saying we wouldn't be looking to intimidate or have fights with anyone. But you could have a young man walking in front of us or walking towards us, and you don't realize that actually that's quite a threat. That's it can be really intimidating things. So just something to be kind of like aware of is how you could come across at times. I know like when I go out, I feel threatened. Like I think that's my oversensitive nature. And also like with grappling and stuff like that, you kind of I'm just aware of it more. I'm just a bit more, probably a bit overly vigilant. But, in certain situations, certain bars, I'm not really comfortable. based on the people around me and what they're doing, the way they're acting. But
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't speak out and do anything as a result. But it just brought an interesting point to the table.
I reckon the person who's arguing this point is 5'2", has broken glasses, and has a wonky back. But I just, for me, if I think about the neighborhood I live in, there's paths, and I don't think, and again, if I were, it would be interesting to speak to this guy's wife, because I think even in her comments, there isn't much sort of context on. There's a conversation on, I won't do the extreme. And then she's saying, I want you to do something. And he's saying, I won't do the extreme. And it's almost like that whole, we're arguing the car is red, the bus is yellow, and we're not really getting anywhere in the middle. And for me, I don't believe she would expect, if she was on a path in my neighborhood, for me to turn around, walk around the block. That's not what she's saying. I think it would be more, what can you do to let people know it's fine? And I think I do this naturally when I walk by people who see me, and I'm a big dude, so I acknowledge, and I actually have a dog that does tend to jump at people, so I have a perceived threat with me because the neighborhood knows my dog's an asshole. And because of that, when I see people, like, I'll tend to just do a little nod and a smile, and I'll just give a bit of space. And if I was on a city street, I would probably give a little bit more room on the footpath, maybe step into just the edge of the road, and I would just nod and smile, just, hey, I'm okay. I tend to do that naturally, even before this story anyway.
I never really thought about it, mate, to be honest. And I don't, when did I last live in a city? I think I've lived in a city centre. I went to uni at Reading, which isn't classed as a city, but again, I wasn't in the centre for that. So I didn't feel like it affected me to what I do know though is that I worked at a pub that's in Reading, and I finished at 2 a.m. and we lived in student housing, I should say. So we're in areas which aren't the most affluent, let's put it that way. And I felt very uncomfortable. So when I got off my bus or the taxi, I would walk down the middle of the road in a littered area, and I actually put the keys between I did that thing as well. And I was on fucking super high alert. There was no way you'd have got me listen. You didn't listen to podcasts back then, but I would not have been listening to anything. I would I wanted my full awareness. And I was just kind of like looking around, continue like being vigilant, like just not trying to put myself in a situation for anything to happen to be jumped, basically. So these guys are based in Manchester as well. I don't know exactly where they are, but I know that crime there will be a little bit higher than it will be where you and I currently live and where we met, in Herefordshire. So it's I think it's slightly different from that as well, but it just brings a really, because there's context to that. I think that's worth stating. If you come from a town or a village, it is a different world. There are different expectations as well with that. You see, I find it weird here in Cambridge, and you walk past people and you go, oh, hi, morning, or you say something like afternoon. And they're like, and they'll walk past. They're like, but in Herefordshire, everyone is a bit more like that. Yeah. So I find it weird here, and I'm still in like a village setting, but people don't tend to say hello, and so there are little subtleties to it. But again, I think you raise a really good point. Is there are just a couple of small things that to enhance your self-awareness, to try and put across less intimidating behavior. I think it is a case of why wouldn't you do that? As you have the choice to or not to do it.
I think this is a classic example of an argument that you and I would break down and say that this argument, for the most part, has validity. The points that are being raised are valid, but the methods that are being employed for this conversation are absolutely batshit crazy, in my view here. Not intentionally. It's just the way we're going anymore, because we're so entrenched in our corners that we're making our point of view from one extreme to the other. And that's partially why I brought up that slippery slope, because we're now making our position based on what the worst case scenario is in both instances. And if you look at the everyday person walking down a city street in Manchester at 12 in the afternoon during the lunch rush, is she expecting somebody does she even need somebody to do something to say, I'm not, a threat in the middle of a busy street? No, she's not worried about somebody when there's about 20 people all within the proximity. The issue is solely when you're at 11 at night, somebody working at a hospital or something, coming out, walking to the car park, whatever.
Yeah.
In those instances, I think, yeah, it's good to be aware of how people feel, and how you whether you know it or not, how you're making people feel. And that's not, and that's the point that's not been raised really. It's look, I'm not asking you to do it every time you see a woman, which is kind of what he's insinuating. It's I'm asking you to be sensible. There's going to be times where you being present and much more bigger than I are going to be a threat to me, and you're smart enough to know this as a human being. You know, you can put one and one together. That conversation never happened in that exchange, and that's something that I think is very endemic now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great point. I don't think I have much more to add on that, mate. I think that
You're
it's
goddamn right.
the Green Party lady who was suggesting men have a curfew. I think is a fucking joke, and I think that's part of the issue, is that you get these topics that come up, and there is someone that takes it to an extreme. But like this guy's wife was correct to saying that there's always those people that are going to push the boundaries way too far, and it's just really about having a discussion. I think it's really. I believe it's important for, in this case, any women on that side of the fence or people that feel strongly, isn't to be dictating to men to do X, Y, and Z. It's about having a conversation to enhance self-awareness, to let them know how they're coming across, and then let them make the call. Like we should be doing, like, rather than like let's create rules and this is what you should be doing. Like it's no, this is you probably don't realize, but you come across like this. Now you do what you will with that information. These things would actually make you not come across like this. Now you do what you want with that information. Yeah. I just wish there was a bit more of that kind of dialogue in these type of debates.
Yeah. And that's what I see. Is I see a lot, you know, we're trying to break down a discussion on, you know, in the microcosm of a message board, and you lose the ability of inflection or understanding facial tics. Definitely. And this is how we debate topics anymore. And I think it's a difficult. You and I have worked in areas where we have to debate with customers and things of that nature. And I think we've professionally learned how to understand what people's questions are or what people's challenges are to the points you're raising, so that you can address those. That's what you do when you're having a civil discourse discussion.
Yeah.
And you know, these conversations, nobody's reaching out to say, so are you saying that if it's the middle of the night, you're not happy to move over a foot? Are you aware that I'm not talking about every single time you see a woman? You know, those sort of qualifiers. Or he's simply saying, look, I do already do this, that, and the other. He probably does some things naturally. So me smiling in the path, I didn't actually realize I did that until I actually thought about it. When you raised this last week, I do change my behavior when there's somebody at night and I'm walking down a road. I also act like, or I don't know if you do this, but when you see a dude that looks threatening, you know, you just like you stand up a little bit taller. You look a bit meaner. So I
get your posture on. Yeah, exactly. You look that you like. I can back myself. Like, yeah, I do that.
Yeah, which I'm in that instance, I'm trying to look like. Well, I mean, the nice thing about me being so big is I think if you were going to like kidnap me, you'd have to like pre-plan and rent some equipment. Like you would need to hire like a van, maybe a couple of extra guys, because I'm not going to fit into like, you know, your typical getaway car.
So you're telling me this is all a defense mechanism that's going on here? This is
pizza, man. Pizza is saving my life. Without pizza, I would have been kidnapped ages ago.
It's good to know.
This is clear logic. So it's an interesting point. And I'm starting to just see that thread of debate and how people debate. And it's so apparent online. And I bet if these two were in the same room discussing it, they would probably come to a very amicable middle ground, I would expect.
I would agree with you totally. Yeah, I think so.
So shall we move on to the next topic?
Let's do it. What we got?
Pub vaccines, and this is we've had some debate. I don't think we disagree in principle on how things, you know, is COVID related, because COVID is now our lives and we can't get the fuck away from this thing. And it's always going to be part of our lives for the foreseeable future. And now we're getting vaccines. It's important to note that the country that I've come from is doing a really good job of distributing vaccines, as is the UK. I think outside of the two countries that have smashed it, I think like Israel, New Zealand, the UK and the US are sort of the next countries up the rung as high performers with vaccines. Now, this whole vaccine question is raising something up to do with pub vaccines. So there may be a future where pubs can turn business away if you don't show or represent you've taken 2 full vaccines, and the vaccine isn't forced, which I think we all agree that the government shouldn't force you to take a vaccine.
I agree.
Do you think there's a future? Do you think it's right for a pub to have the ability to turn service away if you haven't had 2 vaccines? Do you think this pub passport's a good idea?
Okay, so again, a brilliant question. Then there's a few things to unpack in that. So let me just start by saying I think that any organizations have the right to allow or turn away any custom that they want. So if they want to do that, I think that's up to them. I think if someone wants to be racist, sexist, vaccinist, then that is on them to do that. They can turn away service. I think we should allow them that opportunity, even if it is any of those things. On my opinion basis, whether this is something that we should be backing and doing, I think it's a very bad idea. Risk in social division we've got here, is it going to divide? I think this is where the slippery slope thing comes in, Sean.
It's in. Okay? Slippery slope alert. Next week there's going to be one.
Get a little slippery slope alert, because where does this stop? Where does this come? Where do we come in if we now? I'm going to assume some stuff here because I haven't done a huge amount of reading on this topic, but I'm just going to assume. So, is this the pubs are leading for this, or is it the government are kind of saying that this is what we should do? Let me just qualify that point.
Real quickly, I just want to be able to get this thing ready here. There's something really important. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. There we go. All right. So I think I don't know whether this is a pub or a government thing. I think the government.
That's important too. That's an important distinction for me.
So, and this is something maybe I wasn't prepared for, but I believe the idea being the government are thinking about offering a passport, and then businesses, as they have the right to do, can ask for that passport to, as sort of an indicator as to whether they let you custom their business or not. So it's not, the government will need vaccine passports probably for international travel, I think, and largely the public is supportive of a passport element for travel, international travel for vaccines. I think that's a different context altogether. But this is for day-to-day lives, specifically around pubs and restaurants who are most at risk of, let's say, another outbreak closing them down, and it's allowing people who are vulnerable, who have been stuck in. So there's a lot of people, and I think this is one thing that doesn't get discussed enough. There are a lot of people that can't take the vaccine because they're being treated for cancer. They have some sort of immunodeficiency, or there's a percentage of people, a substantial percentage. I wouldn't say a vast majority, not at all. It's a very small minority who will not be able to get the vaccine, and they will be at risk. And this thing is out there. And the people that aren't getting vaccinated, for no reason other than the fact that they haven't read the science, they don't agree with the science, and they don't want it. They want to give pubs the ability, in the same way that I think for me, I'm likening this to secondhand smoke when smoking was allowed in pubs. Some pubs banned smoke, some pubs didn't. To give some sort of license to say, look, I can confirm you haven't had your 2 vaccinations. We want to invite everybody in. Therefore, if you can't show that you've had 2 vaccinations, we can't accept your business. I think that's the main theme of this. Whether you agree with it or not is another thing, but that's the main theme of what the whole plan is surrounding.
Okay, so if this was government-led, that certain institutions will need to have these vaccine passports in place, whether you are allowed to do things or not, I really oppose that. And I think let me just put this down as a generic rule of thumb. You're going to know where I stand when government try to enforce more and more rules on people and reduce freedoms of the people within the country. My default on that's normally a no based on what it is. But this in itself as a business, and I think that when I'm thinking of it from the business perspective, that they should be given the freedoms to really make what rules they want. I mean, the pub industry has been absolutely smashed. The restaurant industry has been smashed. If to keep that, like, imagine if there is a breakout on a Friday night and it all comes out that, so-and-so pub had 3 cases, chances are less people are going to go there. It's bad for business. So in order to keep people going there and to keep them safe, 2 very distinct but important factors, then it's in their interest to perhaps have something that they're doing taking all the precautions they can to make sure that it is safe for them. And I think they should be, if they want to do that, then I think that's fine. If they want to deny people for not having it, that's something else. I have a tick which I've got to be mindful of, which is this the COVID taking over the whole world thing pisses me off, because it's a slightly worse version of the flu. And I think that we're overlooking a lot of the other things. And that's so I get conflicted in my head, because I want to push back at any people that are making these COVID rules, because I think that, we allow so much shit to go on, and that suddenly nothing is allowed to go on with COVID. So that's something I've got to be mindful of. Okay. It's me acknowledging that. But I think in this case, if the pubs are owning that decision, they want to do that, then they should give you the right to do that.
Yeah. I don't think I think the government are offering this, and it's not something that they're mandating businesses do. I don't think they have to as such. I think what this is giving people who, let's say, are vulnerable the opportunity to choose where they can go safely. I think this is the first element. And whilst for most people, COVID is the flu, I think that the problem we have is the death rates are just astronomically higher, even though for the average person, they're not. So for the people that do get it, if you get COVID versus if you get the flu, you're more likely to die in certain demographics. So I think this makes, for those minority of people, it's a bigger ask. And I think this is why worldwide we're seeing a bit more fear around it, because the number of people that have died, it's just been astronomical in the last year worldwide. So it's something that impacts, the economy majorly, and it's something that we don't want to see happen again. And what I don't understand, I think, from my point of view, I 100% agree with you that the government shouldn't be mandating who opens and who closes. I just don't understand, why people fight these fights, or how we've gotten in a position where people can be allowed to be uninformed to the point that it impacts public health. And I think there's an element where we need to be a little bit less, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm really struggling with words today.
But mate, I think it's impossible to be informed. It's actually impossible to be informed. I don't think you can be informed on every single indicator for health and safety and welfare of our fellow humans. There's just too much to learn. So I think you can definitely spend your time and close that gap, but you'll never know everything.
But
let's say 2 weeks ago, say 2 weeks ago, I may have walked down the street in a dark, and just walked directly and sped up with a woman behind a woman. I probably wouldn't have thought of even crossing the road. It wouldn't have even entered my head. And now it's been brought to my attention. Oh shit, I didn't really think of it like that. Yeah, of course, I'll do that from now on. So I've just now been informed of something I didn't know. That's just one of the many examples of where things come up. And that's not to account for things like research when it comes in. Sugar, alcohol, sleeping, aggressive behavior, communication. There are just religion. Like I could be ignorant I could be offending people left, right, and center because I don't have an interest in religion. I don't believe in religion. So why should I be informed of that? It could be a fair argument. However, being informed in it helps me not to offend other people and understand where they're coming from, and I can maybe be more sympathetic to that and have offend less people. So there are just too many things to so I think it's unfair us to think everyone should be informed about everything. It's too difficult.
I don't necessarily agree with that, and the reason I don't is there's probably some middle ground here, as there always is with us. But what I would say is I think lately we've been too accommodating to people. We've been too permissive of people to be stupid. We make laws, not necessarily for our best and brightest. We make laws for the lowest common denominator. And when we take a look at vaccines, even forget COVID, we take a look at, the measles are making a comeback because we're giving people license to not know. And that is causing problems. And now we have to adjudicate for people that aren't willing to, let's say, do their homework. So we don't, you go see a doctor because you don't need a medical degree to understand how to treat your cancer. So at what point do you differentiate immunology from, let's say, what you would normally listen to when your doctor says something, because that's where we're at. These people that don't want to get vaccines 3 years ago went into a doctor and their doctor said, you need to stop doing this and start doing this. Okay, yes, I will do that. I've spoken to one person. I need to change my behavior. And now a team of the world's best and brightest immunologists, every country in the world, is saying, you need to get immunized if you want this to stop. You need to get immunized to protect yourself. And now we're all of a sudden saying, I don't know about this. My 20 minutes of YouTube time has told me that I should be skeptical about this. And I think that's where things are getting a bit tricky right now, where I think we do need to start thinking about, why are we bowing to those people who don't want to be educated?
Yeah. So you bring up a really good point, because I think that's where I wasn't coming at it from that standpoint, from the vaccination standpoint. And this is really good when it comes to argument like formation, really, because I think you've really got to be talking about the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like what I was kind of responding to was a general, people should become more informed. And I assumed that was just meant on what COVID is and what we should and shouldn't be doing. And I thought, well, actually, that's kind of unfair, because there are still obese people walking down the street. There are still people sleeping less than 5 hours a night. There are still people that hit their, that are aggressive to their other half. People know what to do, and they fuck up left, right, and center. So why is this any different? Like, it's not going to be different. Like, why hasn't everyone got six packs? Or do you know how to lose weight? Yeah, everyone does. Like, you eat less, you eat less sugar, you move a bit more. Like, it's not rocket science on the basic level, and yet we still fail to do it. So information isn't enough. We know that kind of weight loss speaks enough volumes to that. You need more than just education. But to your point about the vaccine side of things, this is where the social media things can get really damaging. And my sister, again, me and my sister are very different. Our approaches on things, on arguments, are very different. She's a shouty, I'm going to shout loudest to be heard, and you're a fucking idiot if you don't agree with me. She's a bit more like that approach. So you can probably see some signs of that in me, but I'd like to think I'm more open-minded than that. But she brought something to the table along the lines of, I'm going to probably mash this up, but it was along the lines of, basically, if research and science and everyone have been suggesting that these vaccines on the far bulk of, on like, I think she had a number, maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of people have had this, and everyone is now more protected, and yet 4 people on social media across the world have an adverse effect without accounting for all the other things that might have gone into that, and suddenly vaccines are bad. It's like, this is a really poor way of looking at things. As a veterinary nurse, I think, as someone that administers vaccines and that type of thing, I think that type of stuff frustrates her. So that was her way of venting it, and she had a lot of positive kind of praise for that. People, exactly, that's spot on. And I would largely agree with that. Like, we've got to be mindful of what we're listening to here. Like, where are the sources coming from that are going against science? Because science and research should be our default. And the reason being is because it actively tries to prove itself wrong. And that's a very powerful place to come from.
I agree.
Is there wrong side? Of course there is. The tobacco industry they will run research to suggest that tobacco isn't bad. There's paid research out there, but once it's done through government-led, not private-led, like independent bodies which don't have an agenda, we should be listening to those above everything else to start with. They're going to make mistakes, but they're our first port of call, not Gene down the road who heard this through the grapevine about someone's dog. Like, we need to be really careful with that, and science is probably the best default to have a step from. So in that point, mate, I'm in full agreement with you. What I'm quite intrigued to know is what your thoughts on how we counter that. In this case, those people that are scared of the vaccine, that are concerned about, that don't want to take it. What are your thoughts on a solution?
I don't think you can force anybody to take a vaccine. I don't think that's right. I think that's largely, that's going to have a negative output.
That's not healthy.
No. I think the pub vaccine, this article in general, and let me read one of the points here. Because the article was talking about how this could have a negative impact. And I think my large view is, I really don't care if people aren't happy about this as a suggestion. I actually quite like the idea. For people that are trying to get out, I would be more inclined to go to a restaurant, even as somebody who probably won't die from this, from a pub where people are being welcomed in who I know are vaccinated and safe. It just, I want to support that because
Yeah, I can
it's
see
going to
that.
help. For every person, I know somebody, a member of my wife's family is an intelligent guy. I really like the guy. And I don't want to say what he does, but he's very successful and he's very personable, but he won't get the vaccine. And he's somebody who didn't want to wear a mask in his place of business. But I don't understand it because, his profession where he works has been heavily impacted by COVID, heavily. And, what's at play is his business if this persists, and he won't get a vaccine. And we don't know why.
But did you say? You did.
No, he won't. I don't know if it's because he's, it's a dick measuring contest and COVID is proving his dick is huge, or if it's a matter of he just doesn't buy into all this and he doesn't trust government because he's very private enterprise. And I think what confuses me is I want to support those correct points that I want to do everything in my power to make this go away. And the thing I can do is support those businesses that are leading the charge for what is correct. I want this to be a popular theme that people should get their vaccines because I want this to go away. It's driving me nuts. And I believe in the science and I believe, I will follow that. But I think sometimes there's a bit of false economy in saying private enterprise is better than government enterprise, because government enterprise is run by the people, private enterprise is run by profit motives, and I think there's benefits to both. I don't think one is superior to the other, and I don't think having a law in place means that Big Brother's looking out for you, because there's plenty of times where we've made laws that it's not a slippery slope, and this is no different than the secondhand smoke conversation. They were having the same arguments about a vaccine passport, as opposed to the, not allowing people to smoke in a pub. And I think this is along those same lines. And, there's no way that you're going to stop people from not being vaccinated outside of just keep sending the messaging across, make the right decisions, make sure people are aware of the information. You don't want to force them into a decision. You want to lead from the front.
Absolutely.
But just to double this, and I've been going on a bit. I think with this article, and actually, did I read, by the way, I've lost my track. Did I read the bit from the professor on this? There's a quote from a professor about this pub vaccine thing.
Yeah, go on, read it.
So Professor Riker of the University of St. Andrews told BBC Radio 4's Today program there was a lack of support for using vaccine passports to exclude people from social activities. People actually aren't averse to vaccine passports not to be able to travel international, he said. But when it comes to negative incentives to, in effect, barring people from everyday lives from social activity, then actually they work in a very different way. He added this could lead to other problems like social division and social apartheid, and could destroy any sense of community that has been so positive to the pandemic. And early research into Israel's vaccine passport system called the Green Pass found that while incentives may increase vaccination rates, they may not be sufficient to overcome health concerns among those who are hesitant. So I think that's making the point that if you force it, people aren't going to necessarily learn. They're going to be a bit more obstinate. But as far as giving pubs the opportunity to discriminate against people for not getting a vaccine, I'm okay with that. I'm more than okay with that. No problem whatsoever. And if you're whining about it, we're not forcing you to get a vaccine. You can't come into a place of business where people want to protect all of their patrons. I have no problem with that.
So you did read that out. That I wasn't sure if that was the one or not.
I'll edit that out. It's my dementia there. Sorry.
That's fine. I mean, it was good. It's a good point just to reiterate that, because I agree with you 100% on that. As long as it's not government forcing pubs to enforce this vaccine passport. If some pubs don't want that and don't care, they don't want to be pushing their clients to do that, and they want to be known as the place that doesn't have that, power to them. And if you have a pub or restaurant that's like, no, anyone has to have had proof they've had a vaccine to step foot in here, go ahead. I support it fully. Like, we shouldn't be making businesses make a decision either way, and we shouldn't be forcing people to have a vaccine either way. One of the things I just wanted to very quickly unpack was to the person that in, I think, your other half's family, was that if they don't want one, that's fine. Like, maybe you're a 25-year-old person and you don't want a needle in your arm unnecessarily. And I back myself as a 25-year-old fit male that takes part in sport or whatever it is, that I can take this, and I don't want to have the risk of some small percentage thing going wrong. I think actually I'm fine taking this thing as it is. I've got a good set of lungs, everything else. I've been checked out. I'm in good health. I'll tackle this thing naturally. I don't need I'm not an 80-year-old, man, So if someone wanted to take that, then I support their freedom to take that. Now, myself, as a 25-year-old, or I can only speak as a 38-year-old, but I'm going to have the vaccine when I'm given it. I don't need it. It's not stopping me doing anything. I'd come to your house. I'd socialize with 8 of my family members. I'm fine with the levels of risk to take it personally. I'd still take the vaccine, but I still feel that people should have the choice whether to or not to. And as long as it's coming from, like you said, as long as we are giving them the information for them to make that decision, that's fine. And I kind of support that information being fed out. And we shouldn't be drilling people in to make these decisions. And as far as going back to the final point on kind of segregation, I don't know. Would it happen? Maybe. Maybe. I mean, I've a thing that we're probably going off track a little bit here, so we can maybe cut this thing that I'm going to talk about now. But actually, I don't think anyone should be protesting right now. It actually pisses me off to see that, like, people going down that path of like, we shouldn't be, we're not supposed to be going down that, and everyone else is having to do that, and you're stopping potential key workers going to their job, and I don't think you're helping anyone by doing it. I'm not a fan of protests in general. I don't think they really get the result, but that's neither here nor there. I don't think people should be protesting right now. I don't think it's the ethical thing to be doing while everyone else is locking down. So risking kind of social division, I think that's dividing. I think that's divisive behavior, which is probably where it came from. But if a pub doesn't want to let people in for the security of its business, and it's been rocked to the core in the last year, absolutely, they should have that right. Yeah. Sorry, mate. I think I've talked on quite a lot.
No. That's fine, because I think you raised some really good points, and I think whilst I don't think people should be forced, I think I'm maybe even a little bit less laid back about people making that decision to not be vaccinated. Well,
I sense that. Yeah.
And I think I don't mind if you're not being vaccinated, if you're choosing to stay out of society, because you potentially, and I don't know that people really understand this, is there are a lot of people that cannot get a vaccine. And if they get this, they are not in good shape. Their odds are a lot lower than yours. And, by you saying, well, if I go into a pub, you're vaccinated, that's fine. What about all those people that can't, we can't keep everybody inside forever. It's just, this is the same argument the anti-vax or the anti-mask people were making. We can't stay inside forever. But now that we're moving forward, those same people aren't necessarily having that same argument to those people that are immunocompromised and can't take a vaccine. So now it's okay for them to not get vaccinated, but those people that are at risk need to stay home all of a sudden. And I just think it's really contradictory. And I don't think people realize that, this is a decision that doesn't cost you any money. It doesn't cost you any issue. You've already been vaccinated. The people who have been vaccinated for measles are the ones who are anti-vaxxers for the COVID. And all of a sudden now they're anti-vaxxers for COVID because it's an inconvenience. And yet they could be saving lives by doing this. And that's the thing that I think winds me up more than anything else. It's not as if, this is the first 3 months and we don't have data on it. I think I would have been a bit more accommodating on it. But now it's comprehensive. The data is back. We know enough about vaccines in time, but it's just more of a pet hate of mine. I still don't think it should be forced on anybody.
Yeah, no, I can sense that. And I think we're largely singing on the same hymn sheet with that, John.
Well, I think, was there anything else you wanted to bring up before we jump over to the sports channel? For anybody who wants to join us, we are on Bearded Sports. So if you want to follow us over there, we're going to be talking UFC. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on today, Hugo?
Well, I've got my shred, but do you want me to wait for the sports section?
Do you think that's more of a sports area topic, your physique?
Probably.
Yeah, that's
what
fine.
Do you think?
I'm happy to raise it on the sports. So to anybody who wants to talk about Hugh's body, please join us on Bearded Sports.
We're about to get a lot of people coming online, Sean.
Yeah, no photos.
Increase the bandwidth. Increase the bandwidth.
So it's everybody who's watching. Thank you so much. If you've stayed with us this long, sorry for those who've watched us before with the inconsistency. We're still trying to figure out our format, but I think we're settled into doing a bit of both. So we're going to be doing shorter shows here on the Bearded Philosophy channel. So please jump in, join us. We're going to be live again, just in case anybody wants to jump on and comment. And yeah, that's us done for this week. Hugh, till next show. Look forward to catching up with you soon.
See you soon, mate.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.